For centuries, knowledge has been hidden in plain sight across the sands of time. Whispers of lost civilizations, cryptic symbols, and forbidden histories have been erased or concealed. What if the truth was never lost, but hidden? Welcome to Eye of Ancient Mysteries, where the past speaks and the future listens. Sit back, open your mind, and prepare to uncover the untold secrets of our world. Let the journey begin now. Humanity had been preparing for this event for many years. The radio telescopes of the world's largest observatories, methodically probing the cosmic voids, were searching for signals from extraterrestrial civilizations. Meanwhile, linguists and mathematicians devised methods of communication with beings from other worlds. Boarding school youths dreamed of silicon organic and fluorohydrogen lovers. Science fiction writers, fueled by astonishing print runs, prophesied catastrophic clashes with anti-human social formations. And scientists anticipated how their colleagues from neighboring galaxies would gallantly deliver answers to the universe's greatest mysteries. Everything had been calculated and planned: the possible number of inhabited planets, the developmental level of the beings on them, and even the probability that Earth would be visited by astronauts, representatives of hyper-intelligent civilizations that had mastered unimaginably potent energy sources and conquered space and time. The dreams of the era of the universal union of reason in space painted such a promising picture that the petty concerns of our little planet seemed utterly insignificant in comparison. All indications were that only a very short time remained before the day when the gallant chaps in gleaming space armor would take the hand of our foolish and misguided humanity and lead it to the gates of a new paradise, where it would experience bliss and peace alongside everything else existing in the cosmos. Granted, there were skeptics who doubted the value of such intergalactic communication. After all, the information would arrive with a delay of hundreds of millions of years, but no one took their malicious speculations seriously, for the winged dream allowed for much more than the mere transmission of signals at speeds exceeding that of light. The matter of establishing the aesthetic criteria for the future union was somewhat more complicated. However, after lengthy and heated discussions, the supporters of thinking molds and living oceans were thoroughly silenced. In his works, the renowned scientist Carlson, not the one who lives on the roof, but another, not only demonstrated that in appearance all creatures reaching the zenith of biological development would inevitably be identical, but even predicted what the statistically most common type in the metagalaxy would likely be. Using the methods of biocybernetics, algebra, logic, and game theory, Carlson created a synthetic reconstruction of man and woman, the hypothetical aborigines inhabiting one of Tau Ceti's possible satellites. This reconstruction was reproduced via offset printing on cards convenient enough to carry in the inner pockets of a backpack, and within 3 days, 100 million copies were pilfered. It was especially coveted by high school seniors, perhaps because Carlson considered clothing a secondary detail and focused mainly on the tantalizing particulars. As for the tales asserting that Carlson's model was based on some dancer and her partner, who had successfully participated in a program at a rather popular, albeit little advertised, entertainment venue, these were unfounded claims, for hardly any of their authors would dare to officially publicize such details. And so, hundreds of thousands of radio telescopes were directed toward the mysterious cosmic depths. 8 billion mouths were kept in constant readiness to break into welcoming smiles. Twice as many hands were prepared for an embrace. 60 million girls vowed to give their love exclusively to the extraterrestrial visitors, and an entire army of youths vied for the honor of being the first to leave Earth and stand under the cosmic banners of the Great Union. And despite everything, when it finally came to pass, a radiogram from the commander of H-26-371, the duty officer at the international airport in Addis Ababa, placed a white sheet on his superior's desk. "I wouldn't trouble you if not. Has something happened?" "No, but, The superior read the radiogram twice, then looked questioningly at the dispatcher. "Are you sure the radio operator didn't make a mistake? She swears she recorded everything word for word." At first the signal was very clear, and then the connection suddenly broke. Strange. He read the text once more. 17 hours, 13 minutes. 26312 E. Altitude 2,000 meters. Speed 1,500 kilometers. Ahead on my course I see a huge sphere with the colors of the rainbow, approximately 1,000 meters in diameter. I suppose. The radiogram ended there. "Well, what is your opinion?" The duty officer shrugged. "I'm afraid the order from the main directorate, prohibiting crew members from patronizing onboard bars, is not always being followed." "Nonsense." The superior went to the wall and marked on the map the coordinates given in the radiogram. The plane had slightly deviated from its course, and at that time it was flying over the Libyan desert. Clearly just an ordinary mirage. "Try to contact them again." "All right." The superior retrieved the dispatcher's bulletin from his desk drawer. The plane H-26-371, flight Sydney, Madrid, carrying 70 passengers, was due to land in Algeria at any moment. Commander Lester, one of the company's best pilots, could hardly have. The duty officer returned. "Well, no connection. Ask Algeria." "I did. They don't know anything." "Must start searching for them. Connect me to Sydney." The next day, sensational reports appeared in newspapers around the world. The wreckage of plane H-26-371 was found in the Libyan desert not far from the location indicated in the final radiogram. According to the Commission's conclusion, the plane had exploded mid-air. The crew and passengers were dead. Yet the newspaper's attention was drawn not so much by the catastrophe as by the circumstances surrounding it. Not far from the crash site, a translucent balloon was discovered hovering 200 meters above the desert. The balloon's iridescent envelope, reminiscent of a soap bubble, emitted radio waves in the range of 21 cm to 1,700 meters. As it steadily descended toward the ground, it shrank in volume. Within 1 day of its discovery, the balloon had halved in size. Representatives from all of the world's academies were urgently dispatched to the Libyan desert. 3 times a day, the largest television networks broadcast via satellite the image of the mysterious sphere. Finally, on the 5th day, the balloon touched the desert surface and burst with a deafening crash. The magnetic storm unleashed upon its landing disrupted all communications via ether for several hours. When broadcasts resumed, over 1 billion television viewers, burning with anticipation, saw at the landing site 3 transparent rectangular vessels filled with murky liquid in which something was writhing. The terrible stench emanating from the vessels prevented cameramen from approaching. However, using telephoto lenses, it was established that the objects floating in the liquid resembled octopuses, moving continuously. There was now no doubt. At last, our planet had been visited by beings from other worlds wielding mighty interstellar technology. Even though Carlson's predictions proved not entirely accurate and the girl's vows were somewhat hasty, nothing could dampen the joy of the moment, the first encounter with inhabitants from distant, mysterious worlds. For the time being, all scientific disputes between the advocates of the anthropocentric system and supporters of the super-intelligent lizard hypothesis were postponed. Instead, everyone was united by an irresistible desire to establish contact with the guests. To everyone's amazement, the visitors showed no initiative. They floated serenely in their vessels, paying no attention to the chaos around them. Public curiosity was nearly turning into outrage, but as always, the scientists were unhurried. For 10 days, they had been engaged in heated debates in numerous committees established under the auspices of the United Nations. In the finally published communiqué, the 3 main approaches to solving the problem were formulated to determine the sensory organs of the visitors, to find a way to prove to them that they were dealing with rational beings, to establish a common language. At the plenary session, a parliamentary group was chosen, headed by Sir Henry Noble, the last scion of a very old family that had landed on the English shore alongside William the Conqueror. Everyone was of the opinion that, with his impeccable upbringing and precise understanding of etiquette, Lord Noble was the most suitable candidate. Indeed, during the parliamentary debates on the government's foreign policy, the leader of the opposition expressed doubts as to whether Lord Noble could successfully prove his belonging to rational beings. But after the Prime Minister explained that, without such proof, Sir Henry would not be allowed a seat in the House of Lords, the question was dropped. A Liberal newspaper, commenting on the incident, presented irrefutable arguments in favor of Lord Noble's candidacy, claiming that even from childhood he had been forced to practice such demonstrations. Now the committee was ready to initiate contact with the visitors. Everything that might facilitate solving the problem had already been delivered to the Libyan desert. Powerful acoustic devices, radio transmitters operating on short, medium, and long waves, and projectors capable of altering the color and intensity of their beams were all set to determine the sensory organs of the visitors. Yet these attempts yielded no results. The strange, liquid, immersed creatures did not react to any of the efforts. During a turbulent meeting of the Contacts Committee, differences emerged. The mathematicians argued that they should try using the language of geometry, universal to all rational beings. The art experts advocated for the language of music. Chemists proposed structural formulas, and engineers suggested dazzling the visitors with technological achievements. Then, presiding over the session, Lord Noble proposed an unexpected and witty solution to try all the methods in succession while giving him the opportunity to establish personal contact with the visitors. This plan satisfied everyone. In the subcommittees, work resumed with renewed energy. Dozens of airplanes delivered materials for a giant screen and for the shell that was to house the assembled orchestra of the United Nations. 6 composers hastily set about writing a cosmic symphony in D major. Some disagreements arose in the technical subcommittee. After prolonged debate, it was decided to let the USA showcase automobile races from Florida and France stage a fashion show. Lord Noble prepared himself for his responsible and honorable mission indignant. He rejected the specialists' suggestion to wear a gas mask, so as not to let the stench of the visitors cloud his mind, and told the press that a true gentleman would never let it be known he had noticed something out of the ordinary. In such cases, he added, a refined person might choke, but he would never pinch his nose. The parliamentary group, led by their eminent leader, arrived at the meeting site by a special plane. Despite the scorching heat, everyone was dressed in black tailcoats and enormous shirts, sharply distinguishing them from the throng of reporters and camera operators who were clad in short trousers and cowboy hats. Lord Noble put on his monocle and, with a ceremonious stride, proceeded toward the 3 mysterious vessels. He was followed at a respectful distance by a small retinue of 5. When they approached the visitors to within about 50 meters, the Lord staggered slightly, performed a dignified full bow, and collapsed, unconscious, onto the sand. The other members of the group, abandoning their carefully prepared ceremonial protocol, hurried their leader to a safer spot. In their haste, they not only forgot to retrieve the monocle, but also, most indecently, used their delicate handkerchiefs to block their noses. After some confusion caused by the unforeseen mishap, the initiative was handed over to the mathematicians. On the enormous screen appeared an image of Pythagoras' underwear. Using animation, the 2 squares built upon the legs of a right triangle shifted from their positions and, tentatively sliding into the square on the hypotenuse, fitted perfectly without any remainder. Unfortunately, even this testament to the power of human thought, repeated 120 times, failed to provoke any reaction from the vessels. Then, after a brief deliberation, the committee reached a unanimous decision to unleash the heavy artillery, music, on the screen two famous comedians enacted a skit written by the linguists, intended to convey to the visitors that the notions of more and less were well known to Earth's inhabitants, while the orchestral players took their positions in the shell. The sun had set, but the scorching sand, glowing like embers, caused the people to sweat profusely. Meanwhile, the orchestral players, having been baked in the shell during the day, felt as if they were in an oven. The comedians on the screen, after exchanging the necessary number of bottles and umbrellas, had already performed the linguist's skit, while the orchestral players were still tuning their instruments. At last the preparations were complete. The 500 best musicians in the world froze in anticipation, ready to obey the magical baton of the conductor. The cosmic symphony in D major began with deep throbbing sounds. The colossal sphere of prime matter, slowly contracting, rotated in the cosmic space. Boom! The string instruments erupted in a monstrous, chaotic burst, an orchestra of clashing, scattering galaxies, an ocean of tumultuous sound. Then, amidst the rapidly twisting roar, a simple, stern motif emerged, a harbinger of life coming into being. Proud fanfares sounded alongside the simplest carbohydrates. The first amino acid molecules appeared. The pounding of the drums intensified, attempting to drown out the delicate strains of the piccolo and waldhorn. The double basses began to intone the somber song of death, proclaiming the triumph of entropy over life. The orchestral players were overwhelmed by the heat. Their enormous coats and breastplates resembled soaked rags. Many had already secretly unbuttoned their jackets and vests. Yet the conductor's baton was relentless, granting them no respite. There was the clattering of dinosaur jaws, death wails from massive, devoured flesh, the flapping of flying lizards' wings, the roar of a hurricane, the thunder of erupting volcanoes, and suddenly, once again, a clear, bright motif. The great miracle had occurred from the humble gray protoplasm. After billions of deaths and rebirths on the planet, Homo sapiens had emerged. A soft whisper spread in front of television screens. On an illuminated pedestal before the orchestra appeared the naked figure of a woman, the embodiment of Carlson's reconstruction. She wore nothing but golden high-heeled sandals and long black stockings, pulled up over her knees with lacy ribbons adorned with tiny bells. She danced. Colorful spotlights emerged from the darkness, tracing her raised hands toward the sky, her head tilted back, her slender, graceful waist, and then her slowly rotating hips in rhythm. Now, amid the whirlwind of sound, a groan could be heard. The soul of humanity yearning for an encounter with its cosmic brethren. More clearly, the violins began their part. The hips spun faster, and the tinkling of the bells grew ever more distinct. Then, something no one had expected happened. From the aquarium containing the visitors, 3 sinuous tentacles emerged, like the unfurling paper ribbons of simultaneous children's party blowouts. They shot toward the orchestra. They paused briefly beside the dancer, then descended into the shell, floated above the orchestral players' heads, and just as swiftly returned to the aquarium. The entire world was awestruck. This was undeniable proof of the power of art, a power capable of uniting all rational beings in the cosmos, regardless of differences in their biological forms. The orchestral players no longer felt the fatigue or the heat. The final movement of the symphony resounded loudly and triumphantly, celebrating the new era, the era of the great union of reason. Meanwhile, the brilliant, rainbow-colored balloon once again enveloped the vessels with the visitors and, sparkling with the spotlight's rays, ascended toward the mysterious depths of the starry sky at the final chord. Report from the chief of the 136th Space Expedition to the Great Council of the Omniscient Brain. By the will and wisdom of the Omniscient Brain, we set out to seek rational beings at the fringes of the galaxy, recorded in the Council's register under number 294. For our study, we selected the third planet of the yellow dwarf, whose atmosphere contains 21% oxygen. We transported ourselves to this planet using the method of spatial oversaturation. The planet's surface is a smooth, sandy plain. There are no water bodies. This circumstance, along with the high temperature and increased gravitational force, compelled us to conduct our research without leaving our protective vessels filled with compensatory nutritional fluid. The planet's biological complex is extremely impoverished, represented only by creatures that move on two limbs. These beings evidently possess some rudimentary mathematical knowledge at the level of the zero cycle of education, which on our planet is considered preschool. We observed their ritualistic games and dances, but could not form a complete understanding of their cultic rites, as every attempt to establish contact with them through the customary language of sense invariably failed. The natives emit odors within a very limited spectrum, and our linguistic analysis could not discern any semantic meaning in them. There is reason to suspect that, in the final phase of their existence, they made every effort to intensify their odor emissions by gathering several hundred individuals in a heated room and forcing them to perform heavy physical labor. Perhaps these scents aid them in communicating during collective work processes, though this is entirely insufficient for us to classify them as rational beings capable of odor speech. In view of the foregoing, we consider further attempts to establish contact with the inhabitants of this planet to be futile. Chief of the 136th Expedition, the report was recorded on porous plastic using the system of the 7 basic odors and is deemed fit for long-term archival preservation.